If your prints have come out skewed, and I don't mean layer shifting, I mean the whole build is slightly tilted to one side, there's a couple of things you can check. Easy fixes, stuff that can be very easily overlooked, and it can make a great deal of difference to your print quality and the longevity of your printer. The first thing you're going to want to check if your printer is causing you to end up with some tilted prints. Let's say you've got a nice little cube here, and for whatever reason the whole thing is kind of angled forward and it's not dimensionally accurate. It's not a square. So one of the things you can check is, one, make sure that your belts are properly tensioned. There's lots of guides online on how to do that, but generally speaking, you want it to be tight. You don't want it to be loose and floppy, but you also don't want to over tighten it, otherwise it can wear down the belts prematurely, and it may potentially restrict movement of the motors, which you don't want to do. And you'll want to check this one here too. GeeeTech Mizar S does come with these hand thumb screws, so you remove the hex screw that comes by default installed in place, and you go ahead and put these in. They include it in the package. It's also in the instructions. Now let's say that you tweak your belts and that's not fixing the problem. Another thing that you can go ahead and check is to make sure that you haven't over tightened your wheels up here. They should be able to more or less spin when you pull on them without giving you really much in the way of resistance, but they shouldn't be too loose. Your carriage should not be flopping around. Now, another thing you can check is to make sure that these screws are not warped. I followed some bad advice, and this is most likely what caused my initial problem. Was somebody said the stepper motors for Z-axis cannot be screwed on too tightly. Go ahead and crank them down. So I went ahead and I tightened up these spacers here on both sides, and what ended up happening was that my the screws running down here ended up bowing slightly, and it was slight enough that I didn't notice it while it was in operation and just sitting here. And it wasn't until I was moving the arm up and down the gantry that I noticed that the screw was actually wobbling in place, which means that it's been tightened down too much and it can't move freely and it starts bending. This can cause artifacting in your prints, give you weird layer lines, and it's just really bad for the hardware, so don't do that. And lastly, another very easy to fix but also easy to overlook thing is the installation of the gantry itself down at the base. So when you set up the printer, there's two screws in the bottom, and when I did it, I had trouble lining it up, it looked like everything came together fine after setup. My prints looked fine, but it was a very slight defect. And again, I don't know if this was specifically because of the motors being over tightened onto the gantry, the tower being misaligned slightly, because I did manage to align it better on a second attempt after loosening the screws, reseating the gantry down, and tightening them both up evenly on both sides instead of over tightening one side first and then tightening the other side. But after a combination of checking my belts, checking that these are not over tightened, checking that my gantry is installed correctly, and my belts, my prints are now symmetrical.